Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Highwaymen Social. Today I have with me someone very, very special, LaFetra Smith. She is the wife of Carnell Smith, the famous highwayman and minister. He's a very close friend of mine, and today I'd like to share with you all a bit about his life and his path and his journey in ministry. LaFetra,
yes,
you've been married to Carnell for how long?
We was married for 21 years. We was like 3 months from being married, 22 years.
You're 21 years, and together you raised 9 children?
9, yes.
5 of his, 4 of yours.
Yes.
You're like the Brady Bunch times 3.
Exactly.
Wow. Share with us a little bit of how you met and what your original love story is.
Well, I met Carnell at one of his revivals. He had a tent revival, and had a friend of mine. She kept saying, "I need you to come see this guy. This guy will tell you everything about yourself." It's like, right. I said, if he's a real man of God, I'm gonna know it like that, So, I went with her, and I kept hearing this person singing, and it was his ex-wife. She was, at that time, he was married. And she was singing, and I said, "Who's singing?" I said, and it's like I felt like a tugging or pulling in there. So when we got in there, it was like it was just phenomenal service. We was up on the gospel tent because he used to travel a lot in his gospel tent. And I tell you, it was so amazing because before I got in there, it's like the Lord had spoke some things to me when I was home, because I was telling her that if he was a real man of God, I was going to know. So it's like the Lord had dealt with me before I got there. And the very thing the Lord dealt with me about, he said it to me, and I was like standing up there in shock when he called me out. And he started ministering to me, because he has like a prophetic ministry where he ministers to people, and God gives him, things about the people. And he was telling me some things about myself, and it's like, oh my God, he is a real man of God. To make a long story short, so that's how I actually met him. And I just kept coming back because I was really intrigued, and about his ministry, because I always would see like, who is with the big tents, I can't even think of their names right now, but I always would see the white pastors with the big tents. And whatnot, and I've never seen no one of our color, with a tent, doing the same thing. So it was kind of like, okay, this guy is a little bit.
He was the real deal.
Yeah,
very charismatic individual.
He
Yes,
was the real
absolutely.
deal. So yeah. And I followed this ministry, for a while after that, and basically, I guess he met my mom. She came to one of the services because I was inviting my family, and everybody like, come, you got to come. And my mom had a piece of property, and he asked her if he could put his tent there in Lake Worth. And, and then we all became like friends and stuff like that. But I didn't know that his his ex-wife, they were in the process of a divorce, And that's basically how we met, through one of his services and stuff. Yeah.
What was a typical day like in your household? You have 9 kids in the house, 21 years of marriage.
Wow.
Such a man of diverse talent, and traveling all the time.
Yes, he would leave me home.
A painter, an artist, a pastor, and he's painting not to support the family, but to support the ministry, and the ministry was to support the family. Did I get that right?
Yes.
As I spent time with him, that
Yes.
was always the case.
Yeah.
What was that like?
A typical day at home, one thing that we always had to do, everyone had to do their chores. Everybody had something to do. Nobody was eliminated. And so I had like 10 dishwashers.
Okay.
So everybody had their time, like, to do dishes and different things. When we would have dinner, it was phenomenal. We never had anything left over because we had some that would eat. They would eat everything. And when I would go to like the grocery store, I would have to have at least 15 boxes of cereal. you know, and buy tons of gallons of milk. So we always had another freezer out in the garage or something to put extra food in to make sure we never ran out. The kids, they used to play a lot of jokes. And they used to imitate their father a lot. They would call me and they'd imitate him and they'd act like it. And then I'll stop for a minute. I say, okay, who is this? Is this Chad? Or is this Joseph? Who is it? Because they always would imitate him, his voice and whatnot. So, you know, all the kids, they went to school. Some, you know, went to college. Some decided not to go to college. And then some of them, as they got older, they moved away from the home, you know.
So you met in Fort Pierce originally?
Originally, no, I met him in West Palm Beach. I met him in West Palm Beach.
Okay. And then you moved to Philadelphia and New Jersey, in that area?
Well, we moved to Atlanta first. We went to Atlanta after we got married. Well, I moved up there first. I was in Atlanta first. He relocated me to Atlanta after we got married, and then he came up later with all the other things. As we moved, and we stayed in Atlanta for maybe like about 4 years, and his sister, one of his sisters, older sisters, called her Lee. She said, oh, I want you to come up here and bring your tent. And so that's why we wind up going up to Philadelphia, because he was going up there to help her in ministry, but he had said he wasn't going to pastor churches anymore. He was done with it. He was just going to evangelize. But once he got to Philadelphia and started doing tent revivals, it was such a hunger. You know, the people were just hungry just to see, I guess, the miracles, because God used to use him to perform miracles. I mean, people would get out of wheelchairs, seen the blinded eyes open, the deaf ears unstopped, seen all kinds of miracles. And he told the people, because they said, where are we going to go now? That's what they were asking him, because he was leaving. And they said, could you come and be our pastor? And he said, no, I promised my wife I wasn't going to pastor anymore, and I was just going to travel. And he told him, he said, if you find a building, he said, I'll come and be your pastor. And he came home, because he would be home maybe 2 or 3 days out of the week,
right,
and then he'll be up in Philadelphia, right, you know. And so this particular day, he got this phone call, and they said, we have a building. And he said, oh my God. He said, I need to talk to you, honey. It's like, okay, you know. He said, I told these people if they got a building, I was gonna come and be their pastor. I said, you said what? And he said, yeah. He said, they got the building. And he said, they sent the limo to come pick me up from the airport. I got to go. It's like, for real. And so I was always home with the kids.
Right.
And he was always on the go. Make a long story short, he started a church, and I stayed in Atlanta. And I told him I was not coming to Philadelphia. Philadelphia was a horrible looking place. Yeah. I was so afraid. When I got to Philadelphia, I flew in, took one of the services, and I was just looking at this place, and it's like, oh my God. I said, did God forsaken this place? I said, you cannot leave me nowhere in this place, please. Don't leave me anywhere.
Where were you, in North Philadelphia, 38th and Market, that area?
He was off of...
Not Ambler, you were...
No, it was Indiana Avenue A and Indiana Avenue. It was an all Puerto Rican neighborhood or something.
Yeah.
That's where he was at.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was so frightened. I was like, oh my God. I've never seen places like that, like all the houses stuck together, you know, living in Florida and Atlanta. I never seen anything like that. And it's like...
All row homes.
Yeah. Yes.
And not the nicest ones either.
And it was like, I see writing all over the buildings and stuff. Yeah. And I could not identify with anything. So that's why I was afraid if I got left somewhere, I would be lost. So, but that very thing I told him I didn't want, it happened. I went somewhere with his sister, and she was always busy running. She dropped me off at the store. She was supposed to wait for me, and I was going to pick up a few things. I came back out, and she was not there. I was like, what in the world? And my phone was left in the car, so I didn't have no way to call no one. And it's like I just got the bags, and I stood on the corner holding the bags, and I was waiting. I said, he's coming to get me.
And he did.
He's going to find me.
Yeah, he'll find you.
And so after a while, I guess his sister was there. He said, where is my wife? And then she said, oh, I forgot. She's at the store. And he took off in that car, and all I could see is this Mercedes coming down the road, flying. And I was standing on the corner, and he looked at me. He said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He said, do not go anywhere with my sister ever again, please. So
Yeah. And that's a rough area. I'm a native Philadelphian. That's one of the things that he and I had in common.
Yeah.
And that's a tough one. That's a tough one to
yeah,
get through.
and I didn't speak Spanish or anything. It's like everybody was trying to say things to me, and I said,
So
no.
his early days in Florida as a highwayman, painting, selling, paintings to really support, while he was technically a highwayman, selling paintings along the highway was not really his MO. Although I did meet him in that very situation.
Right.
He was in Thomasville, Georgia,
Right.
working on a ministry there, getting a church up in Thomasville, and he was literally painting on the sidewalk at Broad and Jackson in Thomasville, painting paintings for to raise money for
Right.
the ministry.
Right.
And I walked right by him and ignored him. I didn't know what he was painting or who
Right.
he was. And we were opening a jewelry store at that time there.
Okay.
And he came walking into the jewelry store, and he saw a painting up on the wall, and he said, excuse me. And I kind of ignored him, and I'm rolling the wall with wall paint. And I said, yeah, what do you want? We don't have anything for sale.
Right.
Showcases aren't in, nothing in there.
Right.
He saw that painting up on the wall. He says, could you tell me who painted that? He's very, very polite, soft-spoken. And I still got my back to him. I completely ignored him, right? And I'm 5'3", and he's what, 6'5", 6'7", no neck. He's got a head that comes right down to his shoulder.
He was 6'1".
Right,
6'1".
ignoring him, right? And I said, could you tell me who painted that painting? And I look back, and I remembered one of my buddies gave me the painting, and it was a Sam Newton painting. And I go, I don't know, one of them highwayman guys, right? No, paint away, right? He comes right up behind the back of my neck. He had been in Philly for a while at that point, right? So he had gotten that Philly way about him, He goes, hey, you, what do you want? I am one of them highwaymen. I said, well, you take it off the wall. You're bigger than me. And we struck up a great friendship. I've shared that story many times.
Yeah.
But so did he ever share stories about his mentorship with Alfred Hare? Tell me a little bit about that. Did he ever meet Zimbonia Jefferson? Did he ever spend any time with that group? And and how did those experiences? What do you know about that time?
Okay, I met Ms. Jefferson at one of our fundraisers we had. I met her, but when he talked about Alfred, he said that if it wasn't for Alfred being married to his sister, he probably would have been just like a wayward child out there, because he always talked about his mom, and he said, he was so angry because his mom died, so young, and he was young. And he said he always would cry and want his mom there for him, but it's like it just made him angry. So he got out there and got, a little wild out there in the streets, running from the cops, doing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, and that's how he acquired his nickname Pete, right?
Yeah, because he used to rustle, and they used to call him Peter Rabbit.
Peter Rabbit, yeah.
And so, he would share a lot of things with me. And it's like, wow, it's like you was really something else, back in the day. And so he said that Alfred took him up under his wings. and start having him to paint the skies and the waters in his paintings and stuff. And he would tell me how they would do the assembly line, and he said sometime Doretha would help, and he would, you know, he always talked about that Al was the best seller, you know, to sell the paintings and stuff.
Al Black,
and, yeah, and so, you know, he talks, you know, a lot about that, but he said that Alfred was a lifesaver for him, and he always stuck by Alfred. But he told me that the one thing that he hated is that he went to the movies, and he said when he came back, he was supposed to be meeting Alfred, and when he came back, Alfred had got shot. He said if he was there, Alfred would have never got shot because he would have protected Alfred.
Yeah.
You know. So, Alfred.
But he wasn't even old enough to be in the, well, nobody was old enough to be in the bar at that time.
True, but you know, back then, the way they did things,
They had a different lifestyle back then.
Right,
that's for sure.
right. You
That's
know,
for sure.
and a lot of times you got to remember, you know, sometimes young boys, they mature faster when they're out in the streets and stuff, and they might even look the age, and they wasn't asking for ID back then.
Right.
Remember, they just started maybe about.
How many years difference are there between Carnell and Doretha?
Whew, I know he was the baby boy, and she's maybe about 10 years, maybe, I don't know.
I think there's 10 years difference?
Maybe,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so there was, you know, he was still growing up, and you know, he was maybe 13, 14 at the time that Alfred was shot.
Yeah, because his older sister was, she was there, oh God, it's like my mind is like going, but he had 3 sisters older than him, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's like he was the baby, and then it's like he had a baby sister, you know, and had another sister older than him. So it was
the math would be he was 13. I just figured I was born in 1958, right?
He was born in 1950.
50? Okay.
Yeah.
So he was born in 1950. So he was 20 at that time. So yeah, he was certainly old enough to be there. He was 20 at that time.
Yeah.
Okay. Carnell's paintings are known for, you know, their vibrant colors. He did not blend color the way most people blend color.
Right.
You know what I mean? He liked it raw, right out of the tube, bright, vibrant colors. Yeah. A lot more like Marianne than like Alfred. You know what I mean? And you know, there was this compromise of colors, and then I think when I look at his work, I see a blend of Alfred Hare, Marianne Carroll,
right,
and Al Black.
Okay.
And you know, and Al wasn't painting very much early on, but I think as the 80s came around, 70s and 80s came around, Al Black became more prolific in his painting. What do you see when you see his paintings? Do you see a blend of different personalities there?
I do. To tell the truth,
who were the most important people in his sphere of influence that you saw at that time, from when you met him? From
when I met him, basically his children. It's like he adored his children, and it was like I really didn't know anyone else until he introduced me to his oldest sister, you know, and then he started introducing me when we went to Georgia. Got a chance to meet a couple of more of his sisters there, and it was like, it's just amazing. I didn't realize that he was the baby, and they treated him like that.
Yep.
You know, they treated him like he was the baby.
Yeah.
And he had an older brother, but his older brother was, you know, out there. And it's like, I thought it was just him as, you know, the only brother, but, you know, he had an older brother. And with Carnell, it's like, I believe it was just ministry after that. It was his children's ministry.